So let's talk about the dark side of humanity, the dark side of people, and ultimately the dark side of you. The dark side is the part of you that stops growth. It's the part of you that stays stuck in your ego, even when you don't want it to be. It keeps you in this really self-protection pattern, but it keeps you blind to the areas in your life where you need to grow and the things that you're just probably completely overlooking. So let's unpack that so you can figure out how to actually create the growth and momentum in your life by addressing this dark side of you. If you're new here, I'm Ketra Thompson, and I help tender-hearted men and women so that they can stop betraying themselves, so they can reframe their subconscious programming and create a life that is full of connection and healthy love. And I do all of this through this custom method that I have created called the Confident Connection Method. And that, in combination with my subconscious solution, helps my clients get to the place that they really want to be in life. It gets to the results, and it does it by addressing the subconscious issues. So if you'd like to learn more, there's a link in the description below, and you can set up a completely free complimentary consultation call so you and I can chat, and I can give you my best recommendations. So you'll want to check that out. Now, the shadow side of you is the part of you that criticizes something in someone else that you aren't allowing in yourself, but that you would like to be allowing, and you don't even have awareness of it. So there's sort of this dark side that is suppressing things in ourselves, and we're always thinking that because we are the recipient of their behavior, that everything is the other person's fault. It keeps us from being self-reflective. It keeps us from seeing the picture clearly. So here's one really good example. I was in a short second marriage, and it was a very toxic relationship. And in that relationship, he would always go play, like snowboard and ski and all these things, which, cool, great. But I was left with 5 kids at home to deal with everything, and he would never help prepare things before he went or carry any of the weight. So I felt really dumped on all the time as he would leave, and he wouldn't do anything to compensate for the fact that I'm home alone. In reality, even if he had stayed home, he wouldn't have done any of those things either. But in my mind, I was resenting the play part that he was doing. Now, don't get me wrong, it was off balance. It was multiple times a week. It was excessive, and it was also coupled with not carrying any weight to care for his own children. And so I had some legitimate reasons to be upset about that. But in reality, the one part that I was mad about the whole thing. But the one part that stuck out in the shadow part of this is that I was mad that he was getting to go play, and I wasn't. So I needed to look at my own life and see, where am I not letting myself play? Why am I mad that he wants to go play if I'm not letting me go play? So it's the part of you that sees something in someone else and gets mad that they're doing it because you don't get to do it. And that's a big deal. That's a big part of self-betrayal and people-pleasing tendencies, where we think it's all their fault, but really, in some cases, we haven't stepped into our assertiveness. We haven't stepped into what we want and let go of some of the other responsibilities that we take on for other people. Now, when kids come into the picture, obviously kids need care and nurturing, and you have obligation to them. But we oftentimes use everyone in our life, even kids, as an excuse to not meet our own needs and to not do the things that bring joy and fulfillment into our life. So what this does is it keeps us in this justification where we're justified in feeling the way that we do, and the focus is on the other person and what they're doing wrong. And I see this in so many scenarios, not just that toxic situation I was in, but I see it with my clients all the time. There's lots of men who feel like they have been giving and supporting their family, and they didn't get that reciprocated. But at the end of the day, they also didn't choose to start bringing fulfillment into their own life while they were still married. Usually what they do is they get so frustrated and so overwhelmed that they just, have had it, and they jump off the cliff and they're treading water, and they never really created a clear path to get to the fulfillment that they want. And fulfillment in life does require you to be honest with yourself. Where are you not allowing it into your life? Where are you denying your own needs and your own desires? Where aren't you communicating? And this pattern of self-betrayal is sort of a window into the dark side of us. Sometimes we have this darker part of us that feels like we want these things and we want this fulfillment and we have these desires, but because we don't think we're supposed to, we don't think we're allowed, we think we're the grown-up, we're no longer allowed to have fun, we suppress this and we get mad at everyone else who's allowing themselves to have these things. Everyone else who's allowing themselves to be loved, to accept love while we push it out. And I think that's a very common thing that I see with men is that I have a lot of male clients who aren't very good at accepting love. They don't accept gifts well, they don't accept compliments well, and they certainly don't accept authentic, connected love very well. And in the process, they sort of point their finger at the other person for not being what they needed or for not doing XYZ or for whatever, you name it. And the reality is they aren't actually able to accept it into their life because they haven't cultivated self-acceptance for themselves fully, and they haven't worked on this shadow part of them, this darker part of who they are, and they haven't incorporated it so that they can actually have full acceptance. Because we can't fully accept ourselves if we're judging all the parts of ourselves. We need to be able to accept all the aspects of ourselves in order to allow those things to come into our life. So even if someone decides to leave a marriage, they jump off the edge of the cliff, they're treading water, they still have no path, don't really know what they're going to do to create fulfillment in their life. If they've done that, then they haven't done the healing work that's going to get them to that self-acceptance, and they're going to repeat the pattern in the next relationship. And the problem is that next relationship doesn't always look like the first relationship. So we don't realize that we're getting into the same scenario because we don't have enough self-awareness and we haven't done the work in that area to incorporate our shadow, to embrace that darker side, and to have that empathy for ourselves. And I can say that I did this at the end of my 17-year marriage, which was very devastating to me. I fully believed that would last forever. I fully believed we would never get divorced. We were super into our church at the time and leadership, and it was just absolutely never an option. But when he had several affairs and all this stuff came to light, I had no choice. I was either going to continue to betray myself to live in a fantasy of a life that I thought we had created, but clearly we hadn't, not to the standards that I thought we had, or I was going to take this leap into the unknown. And I did. I jumped off the cliff. I took the leap. I had no idea what life was going to look like after that. I had no idea what to do. I knew what I didn't want to have happen again. I was mad at myself. I was frustrated. And I had a lot of shame, especially because I was a part of a religious community. The shame from divorce is pretty intense in that area. So what I found myself doing was, here I was, I had full 100% custody of all three of my boys. They were minor ages at the time. And I had been married since I was 19. I had never been on my own. And I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know how I was going to make everything work. I didn't know if I could. I didn't feel like that was God's plan to be by myself or whatever. There was all these things, and I didn't do the healing work mostly because I didn't know how. I didn't know where, even what to do. And I certainly didn't have the resources to do it. So what happened was I ended up in a second marriage with someone who checked all the boxes on the surface. Went to church every week, wanted me to be the stay-home mom, seemed to have all the same values as me. And then 2 days after we got married, everything changed. It was like someone flipped a light switch and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde came out. It took me a long time to realize what I was dealing with, but I was dealing with some very intense narcissistic personality traits. And so what led me into that was me not healing first, me not taking the time to look at the shadow side of me, to look at the lies I'd told myself over the course of my first marriage, to look at the facade that I had built, and I hadn't ripped all that down yet. I was still propping it up. And when we do that, we have these ingrained beliefs about who we are and what the world sees us like. We tend to try to carry that mask unknowingly to keep some semblance of dignity. And I didn't deal with that stuff. And so I ended up in a marriage that on the surface I thought was going to be very, very different. I thought I was righting the wrongs that I had made the first time, that I had more wisdom and clarity. And in reality, I'd never dealt with someone like this. I'd never experienced someone behave like this. And I certainly didn't know how to cope with it. But the problem was I entered into that before healing because the couple of red flags I did see, I ignored because I felt insecure and needy. I felt scared. And so the times I did see him act really entitled and selfish, I dismissed it. I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no idea the fullness of what I was going to experience. But had I done the healing work, those red flags would have been very clear, and I wouldn't have been inclined to be dismissive of them. I would have seen them for what they were. And doing the shadow work is really important because the longer you postpone doing that and taking accountability for the part you played, the more you are going to find fault in other people. And you're going to play the victim, and you're going to stay in this mentality that keeps you really, really stuck. So regardless of the situation you're in, you really need to see where you're responsible. Now, in this marriage, it was absolutely awful. Every therapist, every specialist, every narcissistic specialist we went to, everyone, pointed out like he was the problem. However, I needed to look at me. I needed to look at why I had cultivated a belief system that put me in a position to be this people pleaser, to be in a self-betraying mode, and to constantly try to fix everything around me. There were things I hadn't looked at. And that's really important because if you haven't looked at the part you've played in a real honest way, in a painfully honest way, then you haven't even begun to do the shadow work necessary. And I see this play out with men and women all the time. I especially see this narrative with men where they've been with a woman who felt controlling or domineering. And then they leave that person. And then what happens is they choose to not take initiative in their own life. So here they left that person, but they aren't actually creating a life they love. They aren't doing things that are fulfilling for them, and they aren't setting really a plan for their life so they can move in a direction that will give them the fulfillment that they want because they don't know how to get there. They have no idea, and they're still so focused on what the other person was like and what a victim that they were that they haven't been able to make the changes because they haven't even had enough awareness to make those changes. The subconscious mind is driving over 95% of everything you think, feel, and do. So if you feel like these changes are a struggle, you're not wrong. They are a struggle because we don't have access to our subconscious mind typically, and without access, we are fighting against really old programming that's keeping us stuck. So that is sort of the beauty of this program that I do with my clients. I walk them through this and actually do the subconscious work to shift those things so deeply that you're now operating with a new belief system that allows you to move in a direction that's more fulfilling than anything you've ever done before. So I want to give you some actionable steps that you can take today so that you can start getting some more awareness here and you can take a look at this dark side of you. The dark side of humanity is what has caused every dysfunction, every war, every ego thing, people who start wars because they just need to be the best. They need to be the top person. They need to control all the things. It's feeding this part of ourselves that really needs healing. So the first thing you can do is you can take a look at where you are not letting yourself dream in a different way. Where are you not letting yourself imagine a future that would actually bring you fulfillment? What are those things in your life that you're not letting even be a dream for you? And Then you want to really decide what are the stipulations that you've placed on succeeding in love. A lot of people have these rules. Well, I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this. And if this isn't lined up and this isn't lined up, that's not going to work anyway. And so they're making all of these rules around how they could even get to this new place where they would feel good. And those rules are keeping them stuck. They're keeping them in this pattern of self-betrayal, and it's actually keeping them stuck in the same thought pattern that they had before, where the blame is sort of external, where you need all these things to fall in place. And if they haven't, then you just can't do it. And so you really want to deal with the subconscious triggers because that's what's driving everything. So take some time and really let yourself dream of having a different life, because you absolutely can, even if it's not something you've experienced before. And if you'd like help with that, check out the link in the description below. I'd love to chat with you and give you my best recommendation. And if all of this has resonated with you, I would really appreciate it if you would click like and subscribe so you can be notified every time I post a new video. Until next time, I hope you curate a life by your own design.